Good evening, everyone. I'm Riley King, and welcome to my special report 18th anniversary of 9/11. Let's begin. Take a look at this photo right here. Never forget. 18 years ago, 9/11 happened. Let's take a look at the timeline of events. At 5:45 a.m., hijackers passed through security screening in Portland, Maine. At 6 o'clock a.m., New York City polling stations open. At 7:59 a.m., Flight 11 takes off. 8:15 a.m., Flight 175 takes off. 8:19 a.m., Flight 11 crew members contact ground control. 8:20 a.m., Flight 77 takes off. 8:24 a.m., Flight 11 hijacker transmit a message. 8:30 a.m., the World Trade Center comes to life. 8:37 a.m., Boston Air Traffic Control Center alerts the military. 8:42 a.m., Flight 93 takes off. 8:46 a.m., North Tower attack. 8:46 a.m., responders mobilize and North Tower evacuation begins. 8:50 a.m., U.S. President alerted. 8:55 a.m., South Tower declared secure. 8:59 a.m., PAD orders evacuation on Twin Tower. 9 o'clock a.m., on boarding flight 175. 9:02 a.m., evacuation ordered broadcast in the South Tower. 9:03 a.m., South Tower attack. Also at 9:03 a.m., increasing response. 9:05 a.m., information the U.S. President. Informing the U.S. President, 9:05 a.m., New York City Mayor arrives at the NYPD command post. 9:12 a.m., on board Flight 77. 9:03 a.m., Mayor's Office of Emergency Management evacuated. 9:36 a.m., evacuation of U.S. Vice President. 9:37 a.m., attack at the Pentagon. 9:42 a.m. Federal Aviation Administration FAA grounds all flights. 9:45 a.m. Washington, D.C. evacuated. 9:58 a.m. 9/11 call from Flight 93. 9:59 a.m. Collapse of South Tower. 9:59 a.m. Continuing of government procedures. 10:03 a.m. Crash of Flight 93. 10:15 a.m. Collapse of the Pentagon E-ring. 10:28 a.m. Collapse of the North Tower. 11:02 a.m. New York City Mayor orders evacuation of Lower Manhattan. 12:16 p.m. U.S. airspace closed. 12:30 p.m. Group of 14 survivors located in ruins of North Tower Stairwell B. Early afternoon. Rescue efforts continue at the World Trade Center site. 3 p.m. FDNY rescue survivors at World Trade Center site. 5:20 p.m. Collapse of 7 World Trade Center. 8:30 p.m. U.S. President addresses the nation from the White House. 10:30 p.m. Rescue workers locate trapped PAPD officers. That's the timeline of the events on 9/11 of that day. This day in history, September 11, terrorist attacks shock America. On this day in history, in 2001, a series of terror attacks devastated the United States. It was a morning that will never be forgotten. 4 airplanes were hijacked the morning on Tuesday, September 11. 2 of the planes hit the World Trade Center in New York City. Another plane hit the Pentagon near Washington, D.C., and a 4th plane crashed into a field in Shakesville, Pennsylvania, after passengers fought back against the terrorists. The attacks carried out by the Islamic terrorist group Al-Qaeda killed 2,996 people, injured over 6,000 others, and caused at least $10 billion in infrastructure and property damage. The aftermath of the attacks saw an overwhelming surge of partisans, the likes of which not seen since World War II. The 18th anniversary of 9/11 marked by remembrance at World Trade Center site. New York City and millions around the country are commemorating 9/11 with ceremonies, volunteering, appeals to never forget, and drawing attention to the terror attacks' continued toll on responders. A crowd of victims' relatives descend on Ground Zero in lower Manhattan today, while President Donald Trump joined in observance at the Pentagon, and Vice President Mike Pence spoke at the third attack site near Shakesville, Pennsylvania. The event of that terrible day and the weeks, months, and years that followed are never forgotten, nor are the memories of those killed by terrorists in hijacked planes. Additionally, we remember all those who have died from 9/11 related illnesses, from their work at Ground Zero, and those who suffer today. The victims' names were again read aloud at the Ground Zero ceremony, where moments of silence and tolling bells mark the moments when the aircraft crashed and the Trade Center Twin Towers fell. September 11 still shapes American policy, politics, and everyday experience in places from airports to office buildings, even if it's less of a consistent presence in the public after 18 years. The 9/11 ceremonies are by now family rituals, but each year at Ground Zero, victims' relatives infuse the ceremony with personal messages of remembrance, inspiration, and concern. After so many years of anniversaries, one person has said she comes to know other victims, relatives, and to appreciate being with them. Beginning this year, there will be a moment of silence at all public schools in New York State to mark the 9/11 anniversary under a new bill signed into law. Given that most students today were born after the attacks, the bill's sponsors hope that by pursuing to reflect future generations will never forget. President Trump laid a wreath during a ceremony at the Pentagon. Pence spoke at the ceremony of the Flight 93, crediting the crew and passengers who fought back against hijackers with protecting the U.S. The Flight 93 National Memorial marks the site near Shakesville where the plane went down at 10:03 a.m. after passengers fought back. Officials concluded the attackers had aimed the Boeing 757 toward Washington, D.C. For families like Mary Ann Marino's, 18 years has not lessened or lost, she told those gathered at Ground Zero after she read part of the long list of victims' names. She lost her son, firefighter Kenneth Marnos. Another person choked up as she spoke from the podium about her slain sister. Even nearly 2 decades, there's no easy way to say goodbye, she said. By now, the heritage of grief has been handed down to a new generation, including children and young adults who knew their lost relatives, barely or not at all. Jacob Campbell was 10 months old when his mother, Jill Campbell, died on 9/11. September 11 has become known also as a day of service, with people around the country volunteering at food banks, schools, home building projects, park cleanup, and other charitable events on the and near the anniversary. Events held in New Hampshire to honor 9/11 victims. Let's take a listen to that video.
A steel beam from the wreckage of the World Trade Center overlooks Portsmouth. Wednesday, a crowd gathered there to remember the lives that were lost on 9/11. Among them, Ralph Kershaw, Linda Jellison's brother-in-law. Jellison says despite the fact it's been nearly 2 decades, the pain doesn't go away.
Every day is tough, and every day we think of them, but today it's extra special, and it's kind of special because everybody is also thinking of all of them.
Portsmouth's fire chief was part of a group of firefighters who went down to attend firefighter funerals. He also got a first-hand look at Ground Zero.
The amount of destruction that surrounded you, and even a month later, the heavy smell of destruction and death, and it really ingrains in you the importance and significance of that day.
Police Chief Robert Murner was working at Ground Zero hours after the tragedy and recalls how the city came together.
It was the citizens of New York that really lifted us up. They were waiting outside of the secure area, cheering us on.
The Portsmouth crowd consisted of both young and old. Ryan Ford brought his children to make sure the memory endures.
I think as long as we keep bringing the younger generations up, remembering those folks and just the spirit of the folks that, persevered through it, and the communities that persevered through it, I think we can keep pushing forward with them in mind.
Today is also known as a day of service, and the Portsmouth Fire Chief says perhaps that's one of the best ways to remember those who lost their lives. In Portsmouth, Ray Brewer, WMUR News 9.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. "9/11 victims with New Hampshire ties." Let's take a look at that video from WMUR News 9.
Chapel Tractor has been in our family since 1955, when great-grandfather Pearlie and our grandfather George decided.
Tom McGinnis of Portsmouth was the co-pilot of American Airlines Flight 11, which crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The captain of Flight 11 was John Ogonowski, an Air Force veteran, and Madeline Amy Sweeney was a flight attendant. The Nashua High School graduate was able to call a ground supervisor by airphone to tell them about the hijackers before the crash. Thelma Cuccinello of Wilmot was taking Flight 11 to California to visit her sister. Also on board, Charles Jones, an Air Force veteran and the manager of space programs at BAE Systems. David Kovalson was on the flight. He lived in Hudson and worked at Raytheon. Douglas Stone of Dover was heading to California on business and to help his son settle in for freshman year at UCLA. Carol Fleizik lived in Plastow with her partner of 12 years and was also flying on business. Carl Max Hammond moved to Derry a few months before he boarded United Airlines Flight 175. He had a doctorate in physics and was a researcher. Robert LeBlanc was a geography professor at UNH. He was on Flight 175 to go to a conference. 59-year-old Louis Neil Mariani of Derry was flying to his stepdaughter's wedding. His wife was on a different flight. The ceremony went on in his honor. Kathleen and Michael Shearer of Dover were on Flight 175 to meet their first grandchild. They were married 39 years. Brian Kinney was aboard American Airlines Flight 175. He graduated from Bishop Girton High School in 1991. Kathy Bantis worked for a company that had offices in the World Trade Center. She graduated from Central High School in Manchester in 1975.
Okay, and there you go on that video. And that does it for this special report of the 18th anniversary of 9/11. Thank you for watching, and good night, and bye.